Welcome back to Houses and Spouses.
Today we're interviewing Anna and Jared, a couple who both work in the tech industry and sold their home to an iBuyer and bought some new construction in East Austin.
And with the new construction build, they were able to select custom finishes, upgrades, amenities. So I'm curious to hear how they made their dream home a reality.
I'm excited too, because there's a lot of new construction happening all over Austin. So I'm curious to hear about their experience.
And before we dive in, just want to remind you that we're always looking for couples to interview. So if you're interested in being featured on our show, please reach out to houses.spouses@gmail.com. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you can make sure to catch our future episodes.
Let's dive in.
Hi, I'm Dan.
And I'm Anya.
Together, we bought a house in Austin, Texas.
And it's changed our lives.
I discovered a passion for real estate and embarked on a new career as a realtor.
And I fell in love with interior design and home improvement projects.
Now, we're on a mission to share the home ownership experience
by hearing other couples talk about the ups, the downs, and everything in between.
This is Houses and Spouses.
Welcome, Anna and Jared. Thank you for joining us today. And Anna, I understand you're a bit of a real estate enthusiast. So tell us about the first house you bought.
Oh, wow. Okay. Hi, I'm Anna Mogavero and definitely a real estate enthusiast. I bought my first house on my own about 5 years ago now in Cedar Park, Texas, which is like a suburb of North Austin.
Okay.
And what brought you to Austin?
Work. I'm one of those terrible California engineers that moved here and ruined everything apparently. But I've been here for almost a decade now, so I think I have earned my Austin street cred by now.
Okay, so you said you bought in North Austin. So what motivated you to move from that first house?
The pandemic was probably a big part of that. I bought it when I was single, before getting married, before becoming a mom, and so. As 2020 kind of changed everything and Jared and I were both working from home and we had a newborn, there was really just no way to make that house work. I very clearly remember when we would put the baby down, it meant we couldn't use our kitchen. We couldn't watch TV because of the proximity of the nursery to the family room. Right. Also, when we were both on Wi-Fi, we couldn't do what we're doing now, for example, and both be on video at the same time, which was super problematic. So we just felt like we needed more space. Plus, we wanted to be in a neighborhood, I think, that was more family friendly, that was full of other children and younger families so that our son can kind of have that, suburban play in the street experience, which was not so much the case in our old neighborhood.
Oh, I see. Okay. So then you guys, Anna, you bought it on your own. Jared, you came in a little bit later. Where were you living before you and Anna moved together? Was it in the same area of town?
Yeah, so I've been in Austin for about 15 years myself. I moved here in high school with my parents, and so I've been here quite a while and seen a lot of changes. I've lived everywhere. I've lived down south. I've lived at Central Austin. I've lived off far west for anybody who knows Austin well. And then right at that time, I was living close to the Domain, and I was renting an apartment off 183 in Duval. And so this is around the time we met, started dating, got engaged, and eventually got married.
Oh, okay. Cool.
He moved in with me. Only because I own the house.
Yeah.
But you then sold that house and parlayed the proceeds into an investment property and your current home. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, so we had already started the process of our current home. So we had already started building, put down our earnest money, which was really exciting. And then we realized that the market was doing crazy, amazing things. And we realized we could probably get rid of that house, which we weren't fully in love with anymore anyway. Plus, we managed to snag a investment property in a very unusual area of Austin that happens to have a 1.9% tax rate, which is over 1% lower than the average tax rate in the city of Austin. So think that was one of our like things that we're most proud of with our new investment properties. So we sold the Cedar Park house to an iBuyer, actually of all ways to sell a house. Took that money and reinvested it into a much newer, much nicer investment property in a very low tax rate area.
And it's so funny. I'll note on that too, because it's topical that at the time everyone was saying it's a seller's market, it's a seller's market. Just, do this X, Y, and Z with your house. And people were thinking that it actually was not a seller's market for iBuyers. And now with the recent news of Zillow taking millions of dollars of losses in similar companies, is actually kind of a historical moment that I don't know if will happen again. And we're one of the lucky few looking back that it might actually have been a seller's market for iBuyers, since they were getting a little ahead of themselves, let's say. So it was an interesting time.
Yeah, I'm curious because both of you work in tech, right?
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about your opinion about that recent news with Zillow having to scale back? Because I know a lot of people are probably interested in that, and you have a particular expertise knowing about the real estate market in Austin, having gone through this process personally, but also like working in tech, and maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So I work at Google, and just like Google, Zillow mostly makes like a very high amount of its money through advertising sales. Right. And so they were trying to pivot into this iBuyer market, but they were still paying. And I've listened to a couple podcasts on this. They were still paying at market rates. And that was our experience selling to a different iBuyer as well, that we didn't sell below market. If anything, I think we actually sold a little over what the house should have been worth. Right. And I think that that's what got Zillow in trouble as well, is they're trying to pivot to like this, fix and flip model, not really taking into account that they're paying over asking already, or what probably over what the market would have withstood for a lot of these properties. And then, with our current potential labor shortages and that sort of thing, the margins they were talking about would have been like razor thin. So I think that they got themselves in a little bit of hot water. Our former Cedar Park house is actually still on the market. We closed selling it on April 1st, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, hun. And it is still on the market, and it's now listed for $20K less than we sold it for.
Okay.
Yeah. I think what it is I think the promise to the consumer from a tech perspective to make things easier, to make it easier to sell your house is a great idea. And I still think that's something that someone's going to crack. And I think that makes total sense, because anybody who sold a house knows there's a lot of work that goes into it. There's a lot of back and forth. However, with Zillow and them maybe not knowing the market, a perfect storm, all the work that goes into it, I think what they were trying to leverage on the back end for their investors, what they're expecting is the hard part. But I still think from a consumer standpoint, it would be great if there is that option for people who might not want to go through the trouble or in a hurry or just looking for a more simplified process. So I think that's kind of my takeaway from it.
Yeah, and that's a great point, that the iBuyer that we sold to didn't even require an inspection of our home, which for us was nice, honestly, because a light switch was broken. We didn't want to investigate why, for example, and they didn't make us do that. Zillow had been inspecting homes, but a really kind of rough shot inspection. And so I think that was also kind of one of the gaps, is that maybe they were buying things that were a little bit in less good condition. And then realizing that more work would probably have to be put into those homes. I also think Jared made a really good point that just as far as an ease of sale kind of process, it was really great. I mean, we closed in 2 weeks. We didn't even have to do anything. Literally, we just moved and did a very, very rough cleaning of just removing our things. We didn't have to do anything else. And as you guys know, selling a house otherwise would be a huge, huge pain.
Yeah, at the time we're it's hard to see how they benefit so much from this. And with more recent news, it's well,
maybe they don't. Yeah. Sometimes they don't. Yeah. It sounded like maybe they were getting ahead of themselves, like a lot of people were, in terms of where they thought the market was going. And then when the slowdown happened, well, you mentioned now your house is still on the market, right?
Yeah. So now it's been on the market for over 6 months. Okay.
Could you explain then a little bit about that process working with that iBuyer? Did they require an inspection, or was there an option period after they made their offer?
Nothing. Nope. Nothing like that. It was so that's why we did it, right? It was really, really straightforward and easy. I filled out a quote request online, just saying, basic, providing them with my address so they could look up the property records, and then just saying basic conditions. They made me a very generous offer, and
Got it.
I didn't expect the offer to come in nearly as high as it did. And so I was actually working with a friend of ours who's our realtor too at the time. And we even had him come over and like look at the house. And because I didn't want to pull back from like potentially working with him, but even he ended up saying like, this offer is probably overly generous for what this house needs from like a repairs perspective. Then all we really had to do was do like a little video conference, like on my phone, of walking around the house with an account executive from the iBuyer, where we just showed him basically the high level condition of appliances and kind of just where the rooms were, and a high level like just video of the pool outside. And that's really it.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds as though they were really capitalizing on that hot market over the summer, right?
Mm-hmm.
So moving forward, you moved into a different neighborhood. What motivated you to move to that area, and where did you move?
Jared?
Yeah, I should say at this time we were juggling a couple of things. And so before we sold the house, we started building a house. And so we went through that entire process of going to design center and going over every detail. And what drove us there is the customization, the idea of what the neighborhood's going to be, looking around at how many young families are moving in there, and kind of just the overall community.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember I was pregnant when we went and looked at model homes in the development, and there was a bunch of other pregnant people walking around, which I think is always like such a good sign that there's going to be other young families. And there's an elementary school too on site, and we managed to get a lot that's like 2 or 3 blocks from that elementary school, and that's really exciting. So that our son can, walk to school one day maybe, and with his little friends that also all live here. That was a big part of it. The other, it was just location. So we are super close to the airport. Pre-COVID, we both travel for work. And so having to go back to Cedar Park after a business trip of, and then sitting in an hour's worth of traffic is pretty horrific. Now we're home in 10 minutes if we need to fly somewhere. And we're also 15 minutes downtown. So, even in the worst traffic, it's taken me like 25 to get to the Google office downtown, which is like an amazing commute compared to our last home.
That's great. What's the name of the neighborhood? This is East Austin, right?
Yeah, so we're in Easton Park. Okay. So right now, I think there's about 6,000 homes here. They've actually just announced this week that they're opening up a new section of Easton Park. And so I think the final plans have about 10,000 homes here when it's finished.
Okay. And Jared, can you speak to a little bit about the amenities that you guys get in Easton Park?
Yeah. So we went on a Halloween adventure kind of deal for the kids, and so there's I think 25 or so miles that they're eventually going to have of trails. Yeah. And so they put on little centers where you can get candy and had pictures taken. They do movie nights. They do stand-up comedy nights. They have a workspace here. They have a gym here. They just built a dog park. All sorts of different things for charity nights and things like that. And there's the calendar event center. And so it's quite a few things that you could do something every other weekend if you really wanted to.
Yeah, and then just to add, the sense of community here is really incredible. Like yesterday, I needed carrots for something, and we're a little far from an HEB. So I was just able to post in the Facebook group, like, hey, does anybody have some carrots I can buy? And like a neighbor ended up like giving me a pound of carrots, which seems like,
incredible.
It's right? And you see that sort of thing here all the time of people just sharing with each other, and like it's a real community. So we really love that about it.
Yeah. What was the offer process to get that new construction build? Did you guys work with a realtor, or were you doing this on your own with the builder?
So we did work with our realtor, though. Don't tell Josh. We might not have needed him too much, right? The prices were kind of set at the time, so there wasn't really a lot of value he had from a negotiation perspective. Though I did feel like it was just great to have somebody, reach out to the builder for us and that sort of thing, and so that was a value add. We again managed to get so lucky in the timing of things, where it was before that really crazy hot market that we saw in the summer of 2021. So it wasn't like we didn't have to bid or anything. We actually selected a floor plan online based on a picture that worked for us, and it's really turned out to be a great floor plan for us. And because it was still very much COVID and kind of the thick of it when we decided to do that build process, we did all of the design center stuff online as well on Zoom.
Wow.
So that was, I think, a little bit unusual too, where we didn't see any of like our tile in person until it was in the home. So that was, I think, a little bit different, and we've learned some lessons along the way there as well.
Did you also end up using the builder's lender? I know a lot of times they package everything together. So did you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So we ended up using the builder's lender. We were really, so our builder's Taylor Morrison.
Okay.
And overall, we're really, really happy with that experience. Their lender was very, very, very competitive in the rate. I mean, interest rates are still pretty awesome right now. So, yeah, I thought that the lender was really competitive, and then also just did a great job of like educating us along the process because we hadn't, built new before.
Yeah. And you basically have 2 times you put down, one for the design center and then for the earnest money. And
Right.
so that's what you'd be looking at that time.
Okay.
So how involved were you during the process? I know you selected a lot of things online, but what exactly did you get to customize?
A lot. Like, so upgrades are kind of, and changes and customizations are split into 2 categories. There's the structural upgrades, and then there's the design center upgrades. As far as structural upgrades, we extended the size of our master or our primary bedroom.
Oh, wow.
We extended our kitchen. We're big foodies, and we both cook quite a bit, and so we wanted like the fanciest kitchen imaginable. And so we did some expansion of kind of cabinet space and the island size. And then we expanded the size of our outdoor patio space. So we have an extended covered patio as well. Then the rest was just kind of like design visual customizations. And you really do get to pick everything from paint color to paint type to doorknobs to every light fixture, to slow close drawers, which is probably not something I would do again in the future. They don't really work that well if the drawer is heavy. So just something to keep in mind. The choice to whether have knobs or not have knobs on your cabinets. We didn't get knobs. Kind of regret it. We've had to buy aftermarket knobs now, which is a little bit silly, but so you really get to customize everything, like even on our front door, the glass panels within the door and the level of like light visibility through them, what kind of fogginess you want on the glass, like some really specific things like that.
Yeah. We also upgraded the sliding glass doors to a larger one. It's quite big. And then also choosing floors, choosing all the glass, lighting everywhere in the house. You pretty much go over everything. We had some nifty software that at least helped, so we could go through before and visualize some things, help us shopping and kind of look through some things, because you really get on there and you have to decide so many things in a short amount of time that I don't care how much of a good memory you have. By the end of it, you're like, what happened? Who did I talk to? And then next thing you know, you walk into it and you see it in person. So it's a interesting experience if you've never gone through it.
Yeah, the design center appointment takes like 3 hours, and we had done all our homework. We had already made all of our selections.
Okay.
Just communicating those selections and very, very minor changes to our predetermined selections took about 3 hours.
So you had the appointment with the design center. How involved were you guys as the house was being built? Were you like having inspections done to make sure it was being done correctly? Anything like that?
So we snuck in. Yeah, I don't think you're supposed to do that, but we actually snuck into the house like probably 4 or 5 times throughout this construction, just to kind of see everything and check things out.
Yeah.
And because we were excited, we just kind of wanted to see how everything was going. Our general contractor kept us appraised as as things were moving along of, hey, sinks going in today, floors going in tomorrow, that sort of thing. So we would occasionally like drive over and kind of take a little peek. But I don't know that we were all that involved. We did an inspection before I think it was like before the final closing. But basically everything had already kind of been done that way by then. So we didn't do multiple inspections throughout the process, just the one at the end.
Okay. So you mentioned the knobs. You had to put in your own knobs. Was there anything else?
them in yet. They're still in the box from Amazon.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
Was there anything that you like regret doing or not doing that you would, if you were to do this whole process over again, would you do it any differently?
So I really regret not upgrading the level of our guest baths tile to the same level as our primary bath tile. It was a very little amount of money difference, but I was just kind of trying to be conservative, and I hate that tile. And every time we go into one of those bathrooms, I regret that decision. And I think that it kind of is related to the overall understanding that I now have that things look a lot darker when you have them in a big room. So a piece, let's say a yellow like this, it looks like a pretty light yellow, but when you have a huge room of it or a bathroom of it, it'll look really yellow and much darker yellow than you realize. So I think if I was to tell anybody advice is to err on the lighter side of colors, because if you pick a dark color, it's likely to be much darker in kind of a large real life format than you expect it to be.
It's good to know.
Yeah. I think my advice would be to tell people just to be really open on their upgrades in general, because it's hard to estimate in your head without thinking about structural upgrades or knowing everything they offer. And if you just have a price set in your head, it might work against you. And then if you're just kind of taking off things just because you want to get to a number in your head, you might regret it because you have to live with everything. And it could be something where you look back and go, well, actually, in hindsight, it wouldn't have made as big a deal. I just kind of came in with a number in my head. And a lot of different builders, sometimes they offer a lot of structural upgrades, sometimes they don't. And so, you could walk in there and have an amazing option that you didn't know that completely affects your budget. So I would just suggest people to be more open-minded and kind of think bigger just in case, because it's easier to go down than to be fighting and going up, and feeling like you're kind of going against what you might have thought was best or what you kind of had in your head to going in.
Yeah, I'm surprised they even allowed you to do major structural upgrades, because that changes the price tremendously. Did you see any fluctuations in your price from what they promised you, and then like a little bit down the road it was adjusting?
Well, so all of the structural upgrades have a cost predetermined, and they have a predetermined list of those structural upgrades that, this floor plan, you have the option to get the bathtub instead of the stand-up shower or whatever it might be.
Balcony.
So you know in advance what those costs are all going to be. I think the other thing that I would keep in mind for folks is just to think about, really be honest with like the way that you live and what's important to you. For us, our kitchen, when I told my parents how much we were putting into the kitchen as far as upgrades, they thought we were insane. Like, it is by far the most expensive room in our house, but we really, really love it. And we spend let's say 50% of our time there, if not more. And so for us, that really made sense to like put our money there. And so I think that that's kind of another way to just kind of think about upgrades is where are you going to be spending your time?
Okay.
Yeah. So I think luckily we don't have any big regrets because all the things that we really focused on, we did get. It's more of the little things that we kind of changed our view on. But overall, I think we've got what we wanted, luckily, and all the space to spend the most time in.
And then I compromised on some stuff, and I'm really happy I did, because so I wanted like the really big veiny quartz, like the one that looks like marble.
Yeah.
Jared wanted the more subtle veiny quartz, and we got the more subtle veiny quartz, and it looks awesome. And now every time I see the really big veiny quartz, it already looks a little 2020. So I think I'm, pretty glad he talked me into it. I think that's one of the other takeaways here is that, we were doing this with a baby, relatively newly married, and it was a really positive experience of finding common ground and compromising on things. And then also realizing that we like so many of the same things that I think it was pretty validating in that way as well. I think we had talked about this when we were, talking about this podcast, but if you're going to like marry somebody, build a house with them first, or at least talk about like the design elements that, if somebody really likes character and somebody really likes modern, like that's going to be a problem down the line.
Mm-hmm.
It's really nice to hear that you had this whole adventure and this journey and learned a little bit about yourselves as a couple. Do you have any other advice, like other than just upgrades, just embarking on this whole process? You know, you bought a house when you were single, you sold it later on when you were together, you have an investment property, you know, you built the house, you did all these things. What other advice do you have for our viewers as you're kind of looking back on all these adventures?
Probably to within reason, follow your intuition. So, you know, the house that I bought in Cedar Park, it had come and gone off the market 3 times before I bought it. And so I kept seeing it, and I just felt like it was the right house for me. I broke a lease in order to buy that house.
Oh, wow.
And I mean, I obviously paid like the lease break fee and stuff like that. But like for me at the time, like that was my home. And we feel really similarly about Easton Park. You know, we had thought about moving other places, out of the country, out of the state, whatever it might be. But for us, Easton Park, since the second that we started researching, it really felt like the right place for us. And so following that kind of intuition and, you know, maybe taking a little bit of a risk sometimes, calculated risk, is probably the advice that I would give anybody.
I would say that we spend an inordinate amount of time watching shows related to flipping. We have our house accounts on the website. We're on YouTube, and so we really enjoy it. And even when we're not in the middle of it, we're still watching shows. And I would say that if you're not interested in that, if you find the process stressful, it might not be for you. Being a landlord might not be for you. All these things, it's like a hobby that can get ruined, or something you just don't like. We really do, as you can probably tell, we love learning about design. We love Japandi, something we recently learned about, and all these different things like that. We enjoy the process of bidding on houses and losing. And we're still looking at a house today. If you don't feel like that in your personal life, I don't know if you're going to enjoy some of the prospects of it, even though a lot of people hear stories of flipping houses and how amazing it can be, and you can quit your job. It will turn into something you hate if it's something you enjoy. So I would kind of think about that a lot, and spend a lot of time on YouTube shows, whatever it is, and that will kind of give you an idea of what your life's going to be filled with for a while.
And now you're getting to be on a show yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, you both make a good point. I think, like, you know, those TV shows glorify the process, but it is work, and it does require a tremendous amount of collaboration, particularly if you're married and doing it together. You know, I commend you for doing it, because like it can be so stressful. And but yeah, I think your story is really interesting. And so thank you so much for sharing it with us. I appreciate it. Of course.
Thank you guys. We had a great time.
Yeah.
So good to have you.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thanks again, Anna and Jared. We really enjoyed learning from you. And I'm thinking they were smart to sell to the iBuyer when they did, because with the changes at Zillow, that's not likely to be an option much longer, right?
Well, we're certainly seeing a shift in the market. With the recent news that Zillow has canceled their iBuying program, a lot of these iBuyers are less likely to offer a seller above market value.
But now they're in a really lovely neighborhood. I don't think we've ever borrowed carrots from our neighbors.
No, we definitely haven't.
Another thing I really enjoyed about this interview is Anna and Jared kind of reminded me of us. You know, they started on this home buying journey shortly after they got married, they mentioned, and we actually put in our offer right before we got married. And so much like Anna and Jared, as we started kind of building up our house, we were pleasantly surprised that we had very similar tastes. You know, we both like bold colors. So that was really fun.
Yeah. And I think that they brought up a good point that buying a house, building a house, renovating a house, it's a long process, and you ought to be on the same page with one another, because it's not as glorious of a process as they make it out to be on television. So
Right. We'd love to hear from more couples who are also passionate about real estate. Please reach out to us at houses.spouses@gmail.com to be featured. And don't forget to like and subscribe.
And if you have a real estate need, I'd be happy to help. You can always find me by clicking on the link in the description below.
Thanks for joining.
See you next time.